Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Engineering and Technology, SOET, Bachelor's Degree Programs, Bachelor of Science, Applied Science Synergy, BSCAEY, Semester I, BEGAE 182 English Communication Skill, Block-1 Understanding Communication, Unit-3 Verbal and Nonverbal Communication, 3.0 Objectives to understand that communication, often understood mainly as verbal communication, can also be nonverbal to understand some features of verbal communication in the oral and written modes, to understand some features of nonverbal communication, signs, symbols, gesture, and body language, and to consider some barriers to communication. 3.1 Introduction. In this unit, we will discuss various means of communication, i.e., through different modes. It is important to note that communication can be through words, oral or written, but also through other means. Most of our communication is also through body language, and it is this that adds effect to our oral communication. You might wonder which mode is better. The answer is all modes are good, but we should know when to use what. In the following sections, we will talk about the advantages of each mode and the occasion for their use. 3.2 Verbal communication, oral and written modes. Communication is often understood mainly as verbal communication, but it also nonverbal, as we shall see in the next section, is verbal communication, communication through words. This can occur in either of two modes, oral or written. Oral communication is more natural and spontaneous, and we use this mode most of the time. A great percentage of our communication is oral communication. But in formal situations, written communication is required, and not everyone can communicate effectively in writing. This may be because of psychological barriers or lack of technique. We will discuss these barriers to effective communication a little later. It is important to understand which mode to select for communicating effectively. Let's first discuss where the oral and written modes are effectively used, and where a combination of the two is required. 3.2.1 Where is the oral mode used? Personal authentication is needed. Example, between an officer and her personal secretary, a journalist and her source, I heard it from a reliable source, social or gregarious needs must be met. Example, speaking with a visiting delegation, warmth and personal qualities are called for. Example, group or team interaction, exactitude and precision are not vitally important. Example, brainstorming for ideas, situations demand maximum understanding. Example, sorting out problems or differences between individuals or between two groups such as administration and students, an atmosphere of openness is desired. Example, talks between management and workers, added impact is needed to get receiver focus. Example, a chairperson of an organization addressing the staff, a presidential or royal address to a nation, decisions or information have to be communicated quickly. Example, officers issuing orders during natural disasters such as floods or an earthquake, confidential matters are to be discussed. Example, exchange of positive or negative information about an organization or an individual. In the process of appointments or promotion or selection of individuals, a period of open discussion may precede the final decision that is recorded in writing. 3.2.2 Where is the written mode used? Where information has to be stored and retrieved. Example, official records, the reliability and validity of an idea are important. Example, decisions taken by a group to be acted upon, the verification and authentication of an idea are important. Example, a memo. Example, a memo from a superior about new accounting practices, objective references are important. Example, a research article or informative article. Written communication supplements oral communication. Example, the minutes of a meeting, crucial decisions and actions are to be considered. Example plans and proposals, communication is subject to review and reconsideration. Example goals, performance appraisals, personal presence is not required. Example circulating a list of holidays for organizations to choose from. Routine good wishes at the new year, the communicator needs to extend himself in time and space. Example, a letter from a company head to all its branches in a country or around the world, go home tonight and put your great idea on paper. If you can't do that, then you haven't really thought it out. Robert S. McNamara, Secretary of Defense in the Kennedy administration, the discipline of writing something down is the first step toward making it happen. In conversation, you can get away with all kinds of vagueness and nonsense, often without realizing it. Lee Iacocca, President of American car companies Ford and Chrysler, 3.2.3 where both modes are used when people are expected to carry home ideas. E.g., after a brainstorming session, individuals or teams are asked to develop plans when follow-up activities are necessary. E.g., after a consultative meeting, when optimal understanding is needed. E.g., a joint communique about international trade agreements when both clarity and impact are needed. E.g., a new product is launched in the market when the presentation is exploratory. E.g., a team member presents ideas for a new product when audience participation is desired. E.g., the presentation of building development plans for a city when abstract or remote ideas are to be communicated. E.g., a presentation at a science congress or academic conference if you want to give a man credit. Put it in writing. If you want to give him hell, do it on the phone. A regional manager of a company. 3.3 Nonverbal communication. All communication that conveys a message need not be verbal. We can convey our feelings through a smile, a frown, or silence. Nonverbal communication is communication that is not conveyed through words. Albert Mehrabia, a professor of psychology, estimates that 55% of the impact of a message is through the nonverbal mode. Nonverbal communication may be visual or auditory. Symbols, signs, sounds, eye contact and facial expression, body postures, gestures, and physical appearance, all these constitute nonverbal communication. Silence too falls under this category. In olden days, when communication media were not well developed, drums and fire were used as a mode of communication. People would communicate through a relay in the beating of drums. There were different lengths and notes of the drum beat for different purposes. Symbols and signs are used where one-way communication is adequate and effective. For example, it is enough to give a picture of a petrol pump or a telephone on a sign post for a driver on a highway to know what is available nearby. Similarly, a school bell gives information to the children to assemble or disperse. The language barrier can easily be overcome with nonverbal signs, which is why signs are used instead of words like exit, stairs, or toilet at all major national or international public places such as airports, railway stations, or tourist centers. Do you know these common signs? Look at the screen. This is a chart of common public symbol. You may not have seen all of them, but you may still be able to make a good guess at what they convey. The key to these symbols is given at the end of the unit. Similarly, communication can be made with gestures. A cricket umpire makes gestures to the scorer and players about the runs, their nature, and also to declare them out. A football referee warns the players about a foul through color cards. Judicious selection of the right mode of communication for a purpose is the crux of effective communication. In business communication, the nonverbal mode includes using audiovisual aids or media that supplement or support oral or written communication, especially during formal presentations. Thus, non-verbal communication is very important and complements verbal communication. Certain signals work very well as they are fixed and commonly understood. Traffic lights and road signs are easily understood by everyone. Election symbols are easy to pick out on a ballot paper, especially when the number of candidates is large. It is easier to look for a symbol than read a big list of names of candidates. These are popular modes of communication when the message is of a limited nature. It is only when the communication becomes more complex and varied that we need language. And nonverbal communication relegates itself to a complementary, if not secondary, role. Studies suggest that about 45% of our communication is supplemented through the nonverbal mode. It acts as a stimulus to effective communication. Verbal and nonverbal communications are supportive and complementary. 3.3.1 Advantages of nonverbal communication. Visual communication is very advantageous when quick communication has to be made to a large group, or a person has to understand a short, simple message in a fleeting moment. 3.3.1.1 Signs. Consider the role of signals. Anybody who sees red light automatically stops the vehicle without conscious thought, almost. The danger sign of a skull with two crossbones instantaneously communicates a warning. The waving of a green or red flag by a railway guard or a station master passes on a clear message to the driver and to the people on the platform. A flare from a boat is easy to pick up for a rescuing plane. 3.3.1.2 Symbols. Some symbols are universal and easy to understand. They are popular, the same message in almost all cultures. A heart signifies love. A dove with a twig in its beak, or a white flag, indicates peace or surrender. Logos are strikingly effective. In India, the moment one sees the insignia of 3 lions and the Ashok Chakra, one understands that the communication is from the government. Private companies spend time, money and effort developing logos that symbolize them and are memorable and meaningful. If you surf the internet, you will find sites that challenge you to identify some common and not so common, known logos. Logos are recognized by children before they begin to read, and logos are also widely copied, sometimes with minimal changes, to trap the unwary and often illiterate consumer. 3.3.1.3 Graphs, charts and flow charts. Graphs, charts, and flow charts are effective means of communication. Here let us consider a couple of quick examples. The details of the mode of transport preferred by office goers can be better represented as a graph than as a verbal description. Similarly, the split up of expenditure of a country can be effectively shown through a pie diagram. The organizational setup of a university can easily be shown through a flowchart. The first two examples are illustrated. 45. 3.4 Body language and silence. Facial expression is a fundamental contributor to effective communication and sometimes referred to as the visible code. We talk with our vocal cords, but we communicate with our facial expressions, our tone of voice, our whole body, says a psychologist. During a television interview, a mayor denies any knowledge of a bribe paid by a visiting delegation, but the camera focuses on his hands, which are making nervous and tense gestures. When people don't know whether to believe what they're hearing or what they're seeing, they go with the body language. It tells them the truth, says a management consultant. You can play fast and loose with words, but it's much more difficult to do that with gestures. The scientific study of body language is called kinesics. 3.4.1 Eye contact. Eye contact is one of the most important factors in effective communication. When we want someone's attention, we say that we are trying to catch their eye. Conversely, we know that a person who doesn't look at us is trying to avoid us. The eyes have been called the windows of the soul. They seem to reflect our nature. A speaker should always look at the listeners. He should not, because of his own nervousness, look down or look up, or gaze out of the windows while he is speaking. This will give the listeners an impression that the speaker is not interested in what he is saying. When speaking to a group, look at all the listeners, avoid focusing on any part of the group or on an individual. Some nervous speakers make this mistake if some person or persons seem too keenly following their talk. It is for the speaker to bring everybody into the talk and make them focus on him or her. You may remember from your school or college days a feeling that some teacher always looked at particular boys or girls. Remember that looking at someone to establish eye contact is different from staring at them, which is offensive, or looking into their eyes, which is reserved for lovers. At an interview, for example, if the interviewee looks right back at the interviewer throughout the time a question is asked and answered, the interviewee may be thought to be aggressive, cheeky, or disrespectful. In such situation, the acceptable direction of the gaze is towards the interlocutor's face, without fixating on any particular feature, and the gaze is occasionally broken by looking away. Here is a table of some actions and their common interpretations. Action: eyes, face, maintaining eye contact, looking away, shifting eye contact, looking down, looking up over the interlocutor's head, closing the eyes, raising the eyebrow, widening of eyes, irregular movement of the eyeballs. Keenness to talk, boldness, confidence, disagreement, impatience, loss of interest, dishonesty, shyness, nervousness, lack of interest, hostility, surprise, threat or shock, confusion, lips, tight lips, biting the lips, body language and posture, a jutting out chin, rubbing one eye, anger or low spirits, nervousness, defiance, belligerence, boredom, openness, impatience, open palms, foot tapping, folded hands resting on table, attention. Leaning slightly forward, seated, showing interest, relaxed, leaning back, seated. 3.4.2 Posture. Proper posture is also important for good communication. Leaning backwards, swinging the legs. Resting the head backwards in reclining chair or swiveling too frequently or playfully are all bad manners. Bend forward a little, keeping the elbows at the side of the trunk of your body to indicate that you are listening attentively. 3.4.3 Distance. The physical distance between people is usually a clear indication of the relationship between them. The idiom to keep someone at arm's length clearly tells us that the more the distance, the weaker the relationship. The study of the human use of space within the context of culture is called proxemics and is associated with the American anthropologist Edward T. Hall. Hall defined three kinds of personal spaces that surround individuals. Intimate space, the closest bubble of space surrounding a person. Entry of space surrounding into this space is acceptable only for the closest friends and intimates. Social and consultative spaces, the spaces in which people feel comfortable conducting routine social interactions with acquaintances as well as strangers. Public space, the area of space beyond which people will perceive interactions as impersonal and relatively anonymous. Physical distance plays a large role in communication and is normally achieved very intuitively. Gender sensitivity, cultural practices, and individual preferences all govern our ideas about how much personal space around us we are comfortable with. In some cultures, a pat from a superior may give an employee a feeling of confidence and satisfaction that his work is being recognized or appreciated. Similarly, a warm hug or hearty handshake may let the worker know that the boss is open and sincere and wants a good relationship. A lecturer standing on an elevated platform can rarely strike a rapport with his students. One who goes closer to the students, walking in between the aisles, may strike the right chord of intimacy. But too much closeness between a superior and his staff seen as intimidating. Some people use the wrong body language when they are emotional or wish to express something forcefully. A raised hand and a pointing finger can always be construed as a threat. The author has personally observed such a gesture being made by an emotional advocate in the High Court. Naturally, the judge felt that he was being intimidated and admonished the lawyer. The client had to suffer for his lawyer's unintentional lapse. 3.4.4 Silence, its role in communication. Silence is a powerful if intriguing medium of communication. It has a dramatic impact. It also has a detrimental effect. It shows power. Silence can be interpreted in more than one way. Sensitivity is a prerequisite for the effective use of silence as a communication tool. It could be effectively used to express one's protest. It can also provoke introspection in speakers as well as listeners. Silence can have a dramatic effect in presentations or speeches to draw the attention of everyone, those who are chatting quietly or even napping. However, if it is not used appropriately, it is open to misinterpretation as lack of preparation on the part of the speaker. Silence can be appropriate or inappropriate depending upon the situation. It can be a very good tool in negotiations. When unrealistic demands are made by a party or workers' unions, a stoic silence can make the other party scale down their rates or demands. When someone is emotional, it is desirable to maintain silence until he lets out all the steam. It is easier to handle a person whose anger has cooled down. High-level meetings. Indira Gandhi is said to be famous for her silences at high-level meetings. The Japanese are also said to use silence very effectively. 3.5 Barriers to communication. Everybody tries to communicate, but not all communication is successful. That is, there may be a difference between what is intended as the message and what is understood. The reasons for these barriers to communication are several, and may be classified under three broad categories: A. Semantic and linguistic barriers, B. Socio-psychological barriers, C. Cross-cultural barriers. We have already discussed some aspects of cross-cultural communication in this unit and in the previous one. We have seen that barriers in cross-cultural communication may arise from variation among cultures in the meanings attached to gestures, symbols, or body language. We shall now speak about the first two categories of barriers to communication. 3.5.1 Semantic and linguistic barriers. Language is not a precise tool for thought. It needs to be handled deftly, accurately, and carefully. We shall return to this point in later blocks. 3.5.1.1 Ambiguity in expression. Every language has words that sound the same but have different meanings, or words that sound or look very similar but are very different in meaning. Ambiguity can arise because of such words or expressions, whether intentionally or unintentionally. An intentional use of such a word is commonly known as a pun. Look at this example. This can mean either boy come fish for word is commonly known as a pun. They can fish here. They are permitted to fish here. Or 2. They put fish into cans here for marketing. The word can in I is a modal auxiliary. In 2, it is a main verb related in meaning to the noun a can. There is a well-known joke about the farmer who said about his abundant harvest of tomatoes, "We eat or sell what we can, and what we can't, we can." By now you can easily understand how the farmer is using the word can in two meanings. Ambiguity can arise out of the careless use of pronouns. As the following riddle illustrates, a carpenter was instructing his overworked and underpaid helper. "I'll hold the nail in place. When I nod my head, hit it hard with the hammer." What did the helper hit? The suggestion is that the disgruntled helper hit the carpenter hard on the head, instead of the nail, because he asked him to. 3.5.1.2 Homophones. Words that are pronounced similarly but have different meanings are called homophones. Here are some examples. See, sight, 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 I, wait, check, weak, lose, lose. A proficient listener can easily make out the meaning from the context, but a not-so-proficient or inattentive listener may have problems when he listens to sentences like these. It's a naughty problem. It's a naughty problem. Therefore, one should be careful in using such words, keeping the listener in view. 3.5.1.3 Contextual Meaning and Speech Acts. Language as used in communication has the property that much of the meaning is derived from the intention and the context of an utterance. Language is used to perform a speech act such as giving an order, extending an invitation, and so on. Thus the sentence, Ram, the door is open can be interpreted in at least 5 ways, depending on the context. As an invitation, Ram, come in. As a command, Ram, close the door. As a warning, Ram, be careful. As a statement of intent, Ram, we are open for discussions. As a dismissal, Ram, you can leave. As an exclamation of surprise, my God! Someone has broken into the house. One has broken. As a warning, Ram, don't do any mischievous things, lest someone should see you. 3.5.1.4 Stress and intonation. Stress, on a particular syllable in a word, or on a word in a sentence, can change the meaning drastically. In sentences, they stole the fruit from the garden. 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 Can the effective use of intonation, the tune in which something is said, convey a meaning that is not actually said? If you hear the words "he is quite good" with a rising tone on good, commonly called comma intonation, you get the impression that the speaker has left something unsaid. He's quite good, but what is left unsaid is usually taken to be a negative comment. 3.5.1.5 Word shift. The meaning of a sentence can change when the position of a word is shifted. They rang up the parents concerned. The parents connected with the issue. They rang up the concerned parents. The parents who were worried. It snows here only in winter. At no other time than in winter. It only snows here in winter. It does nothing but snow during winter. It snows only here in winter. Nowhere else does it snow. They want the report only on bond paper. No other paper is to be used, only they want the report on bond paper. No one else does, they want only the report on bond paper. Other things need not be on bond paper. 3.5.1.6 Style. Our communication must be made in a style appropriate to the occasion. We shall distinguish mainly two styles, formal and informal. Using a formal style where the informal one is required may create a comic effect. An informal style where a formal style is expected could be misunderstood as rudeness or lack of etiquette. A very formal and completely unambiguous style is required in legal statements, which have to be absolute, allowing for no other possible interpretation. For example, an ordinary sentence. I did not borrow 50,000 rupees from Mr. Rao on 6 June could be made precise as follows. I did not borrow 50,000 rupees or any other amount from Mr. Rao on 6 June or on any other day. But such statements should be used only in legal parlance. Their everyday use by a speaker puts him or her in danger of being labeled an eccentric. The language of a speaker should vary according to the role he is playing. Look at the following statements, which more or less convey the same meaning of empathy. I feel your pain. I hear what you're saying. I see what you mean. 3.5.1.7 A politician, call center staff, a businessman, register and jargon, acronyms. In certain fields, certain words have a special meaning. Those not from the field may not know that, register, or the particular meaning of a word in that field. Example, the word instrument in the field of banking is a check or a demand draft. A section means a bundle of 100 notes of the same denomination. Jargon consists of a set of words specific to a department, field, or profession. Within its field, jargon does help in keeping communication short, yet effective and even precise. There is medical jargon, legal jargon, sports jargon, trade jargon, and political jargon. For people not in the field, jargon may be confusing, irritating, or misleading. A stock market derivative has little to do with a mathematical derivation, and the silly mid-on and mid-off positions do not appear silly to the cricket lover. Acronyms are words made by putting together the initial letters of a descriptive name. They are usually understood only within their context. STD, PAN, PIN, NGO are common acronyms in India. What we call a PIN code is a zip code in America. Some acronyms, however, have attained the status of words. The word radar was originally an acronym, radio detection and ranging. A man told the canteen boy to make a coffee for him with less sugar. To his surprise, he was served a cup of coffee without sugar. When asked, the canteen boy replied haughtily, "You only asked for sugarless coffee." 3.5.2 Socio-psychological barriers. 3.5.2.1 The attention span of the listener, however interesting a topic, the time spent on it should not exceed the audience's patience or attention span. On the telephone, brevity is essential. Emails should always be brief. Brevity indicates an effort by the speaker to convey the essence of what he wants to say in the best possible way. A classic example of brevity: when Gandhiji died, the writer and Nobel laureate Pearl S. Buck remarked, "Another crucifixion." In just 2 words, she conveyed the idea of Gandhiji as a prophet. Student A: the last speaker at the seminar was very good. Student B: was he? What did he speak about? Student A: oh, about 2 minutes. At an inaugural function, speaker after speaker had held forth, ignoring the audience's growing impatience and restlessness. Finally, the master of ceremonies announced, "And now our chief guest will deliver his address." The chief guest, a reputed speaker, got up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "my address is 3 Park Avenue, Regency Road, Chennai." He sat down to a thunderous ovation. 3.5.2.2 Laughter, the best medicine. Whether in teaching or talking, a smile always complements the message. Even a difficult concept can be conveyed through humor. Occasional jokes and anecdotes embellish the talk. Eye contact and a smile give the listeners a feeling of togetherness. When some people are clearly getting impatient, an appropriate joke changes the mood of the group immediately. Here is an example. A member of an audience looked at his watch during a speech. The speaker quipped, "Don't mind if someone looks at their watch. But I do get offended if they hold it to their ear to see if it has stopped." 3.5.2.3 External disturbances and the wrong medium, noise from the surroundings or mechanical failures can sabotage communication. A school used to hold an annual drama week in its open courtyard in the evening. Music blaring from a local place of worship forced the rescheduling of the performances to the morning. People who use computerized presentations need to have a backup plan in case their equipment is mismatched with the host's facilities, or in case there is no assured power supply during their presentation. Each mode or medium of communication has its characteristic strengths and weaknesses. A talk filled with statistics is eminently forgettable if it is not supplemented with visuals such as the pie diagrams and bar graphs discussed. Think of our irritation when cricket scores are given verbally in the television commentary rather than being flashed on the screen. 3.5.2.4 Personal bias and strong feelings. People who have strong feelings about certain issues or people may be ineffective listeners or readers. Their emotion will bias or cloud the message. Similarly, a speaker who have very strong convictions may tend to speak in absolute terms or in a didactic tone. 3.5.2.5 Selectivity, or the "I see only what I want to see" attitude. This attitude is very dangerous because the resulting miscommunication can remain undetected. The speaker may have spoken well, and the listener may even confirm that, he has understood something very clearly. But what has been understood may be quite different from what was meant to be understood. The following anecdote illustrates this. A priest wanted to demonstrate to his congregation the harmful effects of alcohol. He half filled a glass with alcohol and dropped an insect into it, which struggled and died. The beaming priest asked a person in the gathering, "So, what can you infer from this?" The man rose to his feet and replied, "If we take alcohol occasionally, the worms in the belly will die." 3.5.2.6 Cynicism and negativity. The cynical and negative person is not open to new ideas. Counselor, to gain self-confidence, you must avoid using negative words such as can't and not. Do you think you could do that, young man? Well, I can't see why not. 3.5.2.7 Perceived benefits. For good two-way communication, we need an attentive and interested audience. It is necessary for the communicator to ensure that the topic of the talk is of some relevance to the audience. If they do not perceive any benefit to them, the listeners may soon lose interest. 3.6 The 6 WHs that see you through as a communicator. In a profession or maybe even in life, 6 WHs hold the golden key to successful communication. These are complementary to each other and not mutually exclusive. Before we should ask ourselves the following questions: 1. Why am I communicating? 2. With whom am I communicating? 3. How should I communicate? 4. What am I communicating? 5. Where am I communicating? 6. When am I communicating? These questions are important because when the place changes, our status too changes. We may not be treated the same way as we are treated in our place. Even a good thing said at a wrong time may not attract the other's attention because the time is inconvenient to them or unsuitable to them. If the communication is purposeless or not required by the others, we may not interest them. 3.8 Let us sum up. Communication can be classified into verbal and nonverbal communication. Verbal communication involves oral and written modes. Nonverbal communication does not use words. One-way and two-way communication are types of communication. In one-way communication, no response is expected. Two-way communication works both ways. It is effective. We may use the oral mode or the written mode of verbal communication. On some occasion, we have to use both the modes. Nonverbal communication cuts across language barriers. It is sometimes very quick to communicate, but it has the danger of not being understood or even being misunderstood due to variations in cultures. Symbols, visuals, dress code, postures, silence, eye contact, space distancing, body language are some of the contributors for non-verbal communication. Silence is also a kind of communication. It can be used effectively sometimes. It can be used to express dissent and also to create interest in the listeners. It is very important during negotiations. Despite being proficient in the language, communication fails or at least is not effective. The factors that act as barriers can be classified: A. Linguistic semantic barriers, B. Socio-psychological barriers, and C. Cultural barriers. Some of the linguistic semantic barriers are ambiguity, accent, pitch, use of acronyms, careless word shift, wrong intonation, use of jargon, idioms. Some of the socio-psychological barriers are choice of wrong medium, lack of humor, time constraint, inhibitions, no perceived benefit to the audience, absence of body language or wrong use of body language. Cross-cultural barriers include inability to understand signals in other cultures, attaching meanings as per one's own culture, not developing sensitivity to other cultures, space distancing, selectivity, or "I see what I want to see" attitude. To be a good communicator, one should remember the 6 WHs: when, why, with whom, How? What? Where? Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.